Hello and welcome to Restoration DIY. In this episode I'll be doing something a bit different. I was recently asked if I'd like to test a new laser engraver, and eager to try out new products, I jumped at the chance. This is the Laser Master 3 by Ortur, and full disclosure, this was given to me free of charge in exchange for an honest video review. So without further ado, let's get into it. It arrived securely packaged, and on opening the box, I found all the pieces in foam inserts, protecting them from any damage whilst in transport. On close inspection, all the parts are well made from metal box section and aluminium extrusions. I won't show the full unboxing, but with everything laid out on the workbench, I have to say I was very impressed with the build quality and the finish. And this is all the parts you get, plus safety glasses. And this is what it looks like fully assembled. I decided not to record a full assembly. There are lots of videos showing this being done. The Ortur website is a good place to start. The parts also include some plastic tubing and fittings to install the optional air assist pump, but I didn't have one, so I'll save those for another time. So with no time to waste, I set about doing my first test. Taking a scrap piece of walnut placed in the working area, I set the laser offset using a manual height adjustment and began my first engraving. This is it running at normal speed, and this is the video speeded up 5 times. Whilst this is running, I'll talk about the various ways to connect the laser engraver. You can use a laptop connected via USB or by Wi-Fi, and from your phone using an app called Laser Explorer. I don't have a great Wi-Fi connection in my workshop, so I used a laptop and USB. On the laptop I installed Laser GRBL. This is a free to use program, and it's the one I used throughout the test. It allows you to interface with the Laser Master 3, importing various file types including G-code, raster files, experimental vector image files, and native Laser GRBL project files. The software deserves a dedicated video, so I won't go into too much detail on this test. And if you're wondering, the laptop I used is a Lenovo ThinkPad X390. It's around 3 to 4 years old, fitted with a mediocre Intel i5 processor, 16GB of RAM, and a 512GB SSD hard drive. It ran everything, start to finish, without any problems. So skipping ahead to the finish, and this is the end result, and for a first go, I was very happy with it. The settings I used were straight out the box. Speed was 10,000mm a minute, power 100%, with the laser mode set to M3 constant power, and just a single pass. Running my fingers over the surface, I could feel slightly embossed ridges on the scrolls, but not so much on the lettering. But anyway, time for the next test. Next up is a thin piece of acrylic or acetate. I reset the laser height and loaded a smaller version of my channel name. Then I positioned the acrylic and tested it with the framing function. If this marks a border around the edge of your workpiece, then you're good to go. That'll do. I pressed run and stood back. Whilst this one is running, I'll go through the buttons and ports on the Laser Master 3. With the exception of one switch, all the buttons and ports are on the front rail. Starting on the right hand side, the big red button is the emergency stop. Press down, the laser will stop instantly, and a twist clockwise and it'll pop back up and you're good to go. Next is the key activated safety lock. Then we have the on off switch. Moving to the left hand side, you'll find the Wi-Fi aerial, the power port and the USB serial port. The switch on the rear frame activates the optional YRR rotary roller for engraving circular objects. Back to the engraving. For this one, I dialed the power down to around 80%. I figured the material was thinner and I didn't want to burn through it. And once it was finished, apart from the positioning and sizing, I think that was a success as well. Next, I tried the laser cutting ability. The material is a piece of 4mm maple veneer. The settings are 300mm a minute at 100% power, with the laser mode set to M3 constant power. The shape I cut represents a typical size segment for one of my segmented wood turn bowls. Another good result. One pass and it cut straight through. In fact, I think I could have run it a bit quicker. The waste block underneath had been cut to a depth of around 2mm, so a bit more testing to do at a later date. The purpose of the next test was to see it engraving at speed. The settings are 10,000mm a minute, 100% power, laser mode set to M3 constant. It's engraving a pattern for a perforated screen on 3mm plywood. Remember, this is just engraving, I didn't want it to cut through. Whilst this is running in the background, I'll go through some of the other features it has. The engraving area is 400 by 400mm. The machine size is 580 by 550 by 150mm. It has an engraving speed rated from 0 to 20,000mm a minute. The laser spot size is 0.1mm and it comes with a 12-month warranty. Another point to mention is the tilt safety cutoff. Basically, if it gets knocked or tilted whilst operating, it will shut off. A great feature to have. So skipping ahead, that's another one done. The speed was impressive and it was only running at 50% of its maximum. Anyway, next I wanted to cut the pattern all the way through. After resetting the parameters, I discovered it would have taken quite a while to cut the full-size panel, so I scaled it back by around 50%. And this came in at a much better time, but as you can see from the holes in the plywood, the first one didn't go very well. It was my mistake, the speed was set too low and it was making a mess of the underside. So I decided to up the speed and I also reduced the size by another 10%, then I gave it another run. This time all was well. The final settings were 500mm a minute, 100% power, with the laser mode set to M3 constant. The material is 3mm plywood. This was a bit of a learning exercise. As the laser was cutting, I couldn't tell if it would be done in one pass. Later on, I realised if I'd had the plywood supported on each corner with a void underneath, I would have been able to see if the laser was penetrating all the way through. This would have required some protection for the workbench, but it would have been a better way to do it. The total runtime for this was around 25 minutes, so I'll skip through to the end. Some of these clips have been speeded up 10 times normal speed. One of the things that concerned me was if the workpiece moved and then the process would be a fail. But there isn't any contact between the laser head and the thing being worked on, so that wasn't a problem for me. Ortur do have an optional laser engraving platform which has adjustable stops. This would be very useful if the thing being engraved had to be placed back in the same place. For example, if you had to do another run to cut all the way through. And with that run finished, I found that the laser had cut all the way through, and though while some of the pieces fell out, most had to be pushed out, I used a mechanical pencil to do this. Something I hadn't realised was how tiny some of the holes were, but they were all well defined and easy to remove. And that's a very impressive result. Some of the pieces are barely a millimetre across, but nothing broke. The laser had cut through, leaving none of the waste bits connected. I was very happy with it. Next up, I engraved a photo. The image I used is the thumbnail for one of my wood turn projects. This is a combination of fine scroll work, a contrasty image, and some hardline text. The settings were 1000mm a minute, laser mode set to M4 dynamic, 100% power, and the resolution was 10 lines per millimetre. I began by checking the alignment using the frame function in Laser GRBL. This confirmed I was good to go, then I pressed run and off it went. All done, and that was my first attempt at engraving an image. The contrast in the vase really does stand out, and the text is clean and sharp. It was a very satisfying process to watch. And finally, I had to try out the full cutting ability of the laser. Ortur say it will cut through 20mm of wood, so for this I had a piece of spalted ash 20mm thick. The intention here was to cut a series of segments for an upcoming wood turning project. This is where my limited experience let me down. First off, the file I created had too many unneeded lines, and the gaps between the segments created more additional lines that needed to be cut. I didn't think about this at the time, and I began cutting the segments. The settings for this were 300mm a minute, laser mode M3 constant, 100% power, and as you can see, progress is steady. But the cutting speed is still too fast. It should be 100mm a minute. But I want to make it clear that I'm asking a lot of the machine. The cutting file was wasteful and the settings needed refining. As well as that, I'm fairly sure adding the optional air assist pump would have helped. So to sum up this section, I let it run for 3 passes and it cut about halfway through, which isn't too bad. If I'd had more time to make a better cut file and fine tune the settings, I'm sure it would have done what I was asking of it. And to round up the review, I have to say I'm very impressed with it. The Laser Master 3 was very easy to put together and operating it was also very easy. It ran flawlessly and I highly recommend this if you're in the market for a laser engraver. I'll add a full spec in the description and there'll be an affiliate link to the Ortur website. So with all that said, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Please subscribe, the thumbs up will be much appreciated, and comments are always welcome. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.